Welcome everyone to the EED webinar number 20. It is September 2nd. Our theme is discernment, wisdom, and intuition. So we have a few people joining us today from Europe, and maybe a couple more people will join. We don't know. Discernment, wisdom, intuition, these are various ways that we can navigate ourselves through life. It is different than logic, judgment, or belief. And I'm saying that these are our higher faculties. It demands more of us in order to access wisdom and intuition and to be able to discern. It's much easier to just gain knowledge, use logic, and judge. I'm going to give distinctions between all of these terms in this, and I feel that right now it is actually critically important that we start using more discernment, less judgment, that we use more wisdom rather than knowledge, because we don't know the kind of knowledge that we've received. The way the world is working right now, we're being thrown so much information, misinformation, confusion. We need to be able to sort that through. And we need a compass to be able to do that with. And if we're completely dependent on something outside of ourselves, it could mislead us. And part of what EED is all about is being your own compass and being able to access that compass at will and regularly, and be able to distinguish between levels of truth, and then have the autonomy to make up your own mind and have the resilience to live with your choices and work with your choices and to be creative with all your choices. So there's a lot of variables in there. I'm not saying I know what's true or not true, but what I'm saying is we need to make decisions and live by our decisions and stand by them, and then be willing to be flexible and change when the world around us changes. So that's my improv intro to this webinar and some of the things that I feel are important. And again, I'll say, I think this year we're really being tested with what is our own decision of what truth is and what is true and what is not true, and what do we follow, what do we not follow, what do we engage with, what do we not engage with. If we just go by a book of recipes, we can get very lost because we may not even understand how those recipes work. A really good baker understands the chemistry of how bread works, how all the ingredients work together. Somebody who just looks up a recipe for bread on the internet just says, I got to follow all the instructions. Why didn't the bread work? Why didn't it rise? Well, they never understood the recipe. So what I'm saying with discernment, wisdom, and intuition, we can be given many recipes, but we need to be able to pull them apart, reconstruct them, put them back together, and create the smell and the taste of the bread, not just create a carbon copy. We need to be creative and responsive with knowledge and understanding. And that's actually what creates wisdom. Any comments from both of you here that are attending live, Kirsten and Irene, on what I said, or is that just a bunch of gobbledygook? Any comments?
No, it's not a gobbledygook. I think that this resonates, as always is happening with you, Troy, with some of the conclusion I arrived, because to be honest, I made my choice about what is true for me and what is not. And I did it by challenging any time, any information I received, my belief systems. So the question I asked me were, is this a reaction based on my belief system, or I have to move forward? And, you know, look for confirmation, look for something that is different. So I came back to the source. And in other position, I made my choice, and I say, okay, for the worldwide problems, I have not the solution, but I can have a solution for myself. How do I deal with these things? And how can I contribute to make people more peaceful with themselves? I think this is the only thing I can do.
I think that's very, very, very important as an ultimate goal, to make people more at peace with themselves. That opens the way for people to become then more resilient with themselves, and then more creative with themselves, as opposed to desperate and fearful. You're laughing, Kirsten. What's happening? And there were two other things I wanted to underline there, but I want Kirsten from the reaction.
When you sent the link, I was in the middle of watching Star Wars with the kids. So.
Oh yeah.
That's exactly what it's about, and yeah, feel the force. But I think it's and what they said is it is between everything. So sometimes discernment seems like a very lonely thing, and I have to decide myself, my choice, my blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's also like everything else in relationship, and when you don't know, just wait and get the information, and then things fall together, maybe.
Yeah. And this is important, is we'll get lots of information. We need to know how to put it together and what we're referencing to.
And stay in dynamics, like not
stay in dynamics.
Close the bubble, make your decision, go for it, and stay straight.
Yeah.
No, it's also when you have made a decision, the decision keeps evolving.
It does.
And it has multiple levels. So I was just laughing because I'm so not prepared for that call now. But it's exactly what they were talking about. So
yeah.
Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, Luke, use the Force.
Yes.
Also there, and moving and referring back to what you said, Irena, and coupled with what you're saying here, Kirsten. So it is important that we are willing to question everything we know, that we thought we knew. Now that can be very destabilizing.
Yes.
But at the same time, it will give us more opportunity to expand our perception and be more creative with the kinds of solutions we can come up with. Really, beliefs are malleable. And we are highly creative human beings. So here's where I'm coming from with EED is what we intend, we create. And when we put a force into it, an emotional force plus a mental intention, vision, we're going to make it real. We're going to endow our world to become the world we're endowing. Basically, it's a loop. Okay? So, and we can choose to say, well, I'm a victim of my world, and we don't really know that we're unconsciously endowing it a certain way. Why? Because we've learned certain beliefs, certain concepts, we've been conditioned to be a certain way, so we just function within a program. What we're talking about here is if our world is falling apart around us, which it is, it's collapsing in certain ways, that's a great opportunity for us to collapse everything we thought we knew and start rebuilding. But we need to find a source that is not outside of ourselves, but within ourselves. And that plugs in, let's say, to, if you want to call it a cosmic web. I mean, we're all connected through an infinite awareness, all potential, infinite consciousness. We don't need to plug into someone else's construct, someone else's ideas, someone else's determination, and swallow that whole. Because we don't know what the foundation of that is. We need to be able to develop a smell, a sense of smell, like, does that have the ring of truth to it? It doesn't mean it works for me, because we're going to talk about this, is self-fulfilling prophecy. does it seem grounded in reality? Does it have common sense? And there's more to it than that, which is, am I willing to experience it? Am I fascinated about that? Now that I have experienced it, does it work? Does it fit? Does it fit together? As well as developing a sense of, okay, what are all the little bits of data and dots? How do they connect together? How do they function? How does everything flow? There are a lot of, let's say, balls in the air or spinning plates to consider when we think of determining what we think we know. And if we're taught to just buy in so fast to believing something like, oh, I click this headline on the internet, oh, I believe it. Didn't even read the article, but it's convenient for me, fits my bias, fits my point of view. Now I'm going to go spread the gossip on it, and I'm going to make it real. Is it true? I don't know. Never gave it really time to consider it. It felt true just because it felt like it fit. I think that's a poor determination of does it fit, just because it's convenient. Truth is never really convenient. And we have to be willing to be shaken up. And we have to be willing to dismantle ourselves and then reconstruct ourselves. And every time we reconstruct ourselves, hopefully we're doing it in a more pure way so that we are more pure expressions of our own divine spark or our own divine self or our own divine source. That's why I keep stressing connect to source, our permanent, timeless, unconditional selves, where we have access to all potential. So anyways, maybe I'm rambling here. I just, any comments there or any thoughts? And then I can move forward.
No, I don't think you are stressing us by reminding to come back to the source, because while I was listening to you, I was thinking that I would be a source for creating a different world of this. Because whatever I understand in this period, that there are many things that were exposed in terms of the way science works and is corrupted, the way the politics is corrupted, the lack of leadership, all those things. But because it's not in my power to change all those things, the only thing I can change is how can I build the world that I want?
How can you deal with the world?
No, how can I build? I can build a world that I want. And this is changing all the way I do things, the way I take care of my body, the way I take care of my relationship. All those things are changing.
Yeah. So, you know, it's no accident I said how I misheard you on how do I deal. Before you can actually build the world you want, you have to be able to deal with the world that is. And if the world right now, all corrupt, confused, whatever, or things are exposed, whatever, well, we need to deal with that first by accepting it as it is and not moving so quickly into retaliation and revenge, but saying, all right, so that's what's here. Now, what are our options? And I know what I want, a world of peace. So then how do I go about creating that while working with what is, as opposed to wishing something away or eliminating something or fighting something? I'm really not believing in exacting revenge. I do believe in justice. But again, justice and judgment, that could be a very toxic combination, because what are we judging? Where is that knowledge coming from when we judge?
I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
What is justice?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really mean to get onto that, but but I felt that that's important, because I'm seeing a lot of people getting more and more angry or confused, and they just want a quick, swipe of justice and say, let's make the world better and be done with this. But I don't know. There's trials and tribulations. I mean, tomorrow with the EED alumni, we're going to talk about death's door and rebirth. And that is all about a crumbling of the identity, learning the lessons of why and how that's crumbling, and then rebuilding ourselves from new strengths. And it's an alchemical process of, you know, dissolving or dissolution to purification and reconstruction. So I believe that's the kind of time we're living in right now, and that's why I wanted to bring in discernment, wisdom, and intuition, as opposed to judgment, knowledge, and logic. Those are the opposites, I feel, to discernment, wisdom, and intuition. Judgment, knowledge, logic. And I'm going to break those down. So what are we discovering? We're going to look at various levels of knowledge. This could be knowledge, understanding, wisdom, logic, all of these things together. And how we process life, how we navigate life. And we need to make distinctions between how do we know when our information is coming from inner truth or something we've received from the outside, which could influence our bias, okay? We need to distinguish between bias and just simple truth, because bias can contain a lie. Simple truth doesn't contain a lie if it comes from essence. Essence never absorbs a lie, and essence is built upon truth, pure potential. But we can take that truth and potential and then distort it in any way we want, and that becomes ego constructs. So we need to be able to distinguish, is this my ego? Is this my essence, basically? We need to listen to both. Both have a good point. But at the same time, we don't need to cling to one or the other. And if we're clinging, that's coming from ego. I'll discuss along the way simple tools to develop our higher awareness or create heart-brain coherence. And how do we cultivate that intuitive knowing? How do we cultivate intuition? That's probably going to come a bit later. But as we discuss it through, you know, I'm going to show the distinctions between when we're at lower awareness or higher, when we're at complete brain, especially left brain, or when we can combine heart and brain together and tune them together. And then what does it demand of us to be able to actually let intuition channel through us? Because there's a lot of times where we think we're being intuitive, but it's actually coming from our own logic or our own personal bias. You might debate me on that, and that's fine. I'm happy to debate. What's most important is that we bypass our social conditioning, our education, our program beliefs, our personal bias. And we need to be able to cultivate a level of critical thinking, and we need to define what critical thinking means. And that critical thinking needs to be in tune with our own innate wisdom, with our own source. Critical thinking cannot be borrowed. Critical thinking needs to be original. And we need to be able to criticize, debate. It's not about making people wrong. It's not about calling people stupid or calling them names, but it is, we need to chip away at the marble in order to get the beautiful sculpture. That is what critical thinking does. It chips away at things. It's not just swallowing things at face value and say, oh yes, I believe it and now it's precious and I won't question it. It's what we said before. The ability to question everything is the first step to critical thinking. And I don't know, the more we make ourselves feel fragile, the more unwilling we are to question things. That's starting to bother me, actually, because I'm not seeing people really question. I'm just seeing them kind of swallow and accept and move forward, and they can be upset and they can complain, but they're really not questioning. Any comments on what I've said here? Or does it feel okay, sound okay? All right. So let's look at discernment. Oh no, EED, what does it do? Okay, so this is for, I mean, Irena, Kirsten, you know all about this. So this is for people listening to the recording. EED means emergent essence dynamics. It means basically we're accessing the source of things to see how they emerge into a creative expression. Everything is happening in relationship and according to pattern. So all our behaviors, all our beliefs, everything follows patterns. And those patterns work in cycles, and those patterns are actually fractal, meaning all those cycles are repeating on the large scale and the small scale. So these patterns are driving both the person and the issue, meaning it drives me and the way I'm interacting with my world, which means it's the way I'm interacting with my circumstances, my problems, my solutions. So what we're doing is we're pinpointing what are those fundamental patterns. I'm not looking at your problems. I'm not looking at who you are as a person. I'm looking at the patterns that are emerging through your behavior and actions. And this is a foundation for coaching, leadership, mediation, facilitation, etc. And what we're doing is we're not transforming you. What we're doing with you is we're building resilience where you're not a victim to the pattern. Where you're building more acceptance on what's happening with your circumstances in the world around you, and that you're able to be adaptable and flexible. When you are resilient, you have adaptability. It's then that we could see, okay, so here's the patterns that are happening in your life. These patterns are causing certain problems, or causing certain actions and certain behaviors. Now, when we drop you into resilience, you can then decide, oh, can I accept those? Can I not accept those? This brings you more to a level of discernment as opposed to just judging your actions and behaviors and your circumstances. When you're in a resilient space, you're actually more relaxed, you're more accepting, your ego isn't so threatened. Therefore, you can accept more. You can deal with more. You can learn more from what's happening around you, as opposed to resisting it or rejecting it. Then when you're in a resilient space, we can look at, okay, so what are the core root patterns that you want to and can change and will change? It's not about making changes or transformation through stress, anxiety, or fear, but this is through clarity, want, and creativity. So when we change the pattern, the root pattern, in that resilient space, everything changes, the person and the issue and multiple issues. So it goes beyond. So it's like everyone is driving a car. What EED is doing is looking at the engine. And it's looking at how the engine functions. And it's getting the engine into its optimum performance. Or we can even shift around and change the entire engine or transmute it. So this is more alchemy than anything else, because it is about transmutation. We're not adding or deleting. We're actually purifying the person according to source. That was long. What do you guys think of that? Any comments, or is that another rambling and gobbledygook? I feel in a rambling mood today.
Troy, we are just listening. All good. All good.
Does that spark anything or create new ideas or reinforce anything? Because I know you've taken all.
I think it's a super complex question, because always when we try to find a position, there is ego in it. I don't know. I think we are all there when everything is okay.
Yeah.
So when you don't have to judge anything, or you don't have to find a perspective for anything anymore, like when you can be with all the perspective, all the people, all the energies, and stay healthy and stay calm. So when you don't have to act, or
this is actually really good, Kirsten, what you're saying, because EED can be actually really, 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 really simple. Like you said, ego can be complex. It's going to look for complexities. It's going to look for complex ways and solutions and all this, and perspectives and values and blah, 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 blah. But when you can ask that simple question, despite everything that's going on, How are you still okay?
Yeah.
Boom, it simplifies. That's what
Yeah.
we mean by getting into the resilient space. That
Yeah.
question is a direct access to resilient space.
Yeah.
And it takes all the bullshit out, all the distractions out. And then we can
Yeah.
see, now, what is it that you really want to address here, or can? Or is there...
And there's no urge to change the world anymore, because it goes by its own, and everybody and everything goes by its own. So who are we to say we have to change anything?
That's right. That's right.
So just be with it, and
Yeah, and
more
mean,
try not to destroy anything.
No.
So when I say to someone I have to change you, or I have to change the thing, I'm always criticizing, and I'm always saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
So who am I?
Exactly. So when we can come to a place of, all right, even, despite all that's going on, I still have access to inner peace, whether that's a tiny spark or it's a lot. It's from there that I can relax, and I'm not in such a rush to rearrange the world around me for my convenience, basically, right?
Yeah, or to feel better, or to feel superior, or to feel anything. This is all ego-driven, and the ego craves for being right.
Yes.
So that's what people are doing right now. Everyone claims to be right. Nobody's right.
In order to survive.
Everyone is just there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to make great changes, because if I feel right and I feel safe and you must agree in order
then it's conditional.
Then it's conditional.
And then game over.
And then it may not be great for you. And you may not have enough, I don't know, gall to say, wait a minute. Or maybe you do. And now we get in conflict. And it's not safe anymore. I need to be able to flow with you. I need to be able to say, you know, even if it's inconvenient, I still survive. And I can actually thrive when things are inconvenient. I have far more power and flexibility.
Yeah, especially in that personal development thing, there's always the aim to get better, to be better, there's so much judgment in it, and this is exactly the opposite what people try to achieve. They do the opposite, and then they are stressed from hell. Like, I have to get better, I have to be better, I have to awake, I am sleeping, I have this. So for me it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. So let's look at discernment and judgment, okay? Because they're similar but different. I mean, you were talking before about judgment, so let's break that down. Let's define it. Now, when you look at Buddhism, Buddhism makes a distinction between judgment and discernment, and they are similar. And like Buddhism, and like EED, we're saying that we need to get beyond judgment and back into acceptance. And then we can experience things. And then once we've experienced something, we can decide, is this for me or not for me? That is what discernment really is. Discernment is making a judgment call or choosing to engage or not engage once there's been an acceptance of the experience. Okay, judgment says, I'm not going to have that experience because I think I know what's wrong for me. Okay, so you're experiencing nothing through judgment. Judgment is all about preservation. I need to keep myself safe. Is this good or not good for me? Okay, discernment says, wait a minute, I'm resilient. I can accept what's going on around me. It doesn't mean I'm engaging in it yet, but I can accept it for what it is. Okay, so it's bypassing an original judgment. Judgment on the judgment side is closed and rigid. It says, I think I know. Whereas discernment says, well, wait a minute, no, let's open ourselves to that. We can be fluid. And then when I make my decision, I can be firm. I can be firm and decisive and say, no, that's not for me, but it's coming from actual experience and wisdom. Whereas judgment is just saying, it's just making a decision before anything, just saying, no, that's not for me. So how are we making that decision in judgment? It's based on history, past experiences, all our conditioning, our belief systems, but all of that together is a mental construct. It has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with what we think our reality is. Discernment, because of acceptance, because of being open and fluid, fascinated, it's more based on truthful experience and a fascinating exploration of what's going on. It can draw from the experience and say, aha, well, I can appreciate this or that from it, and I can throw the rest away, or I can take all of it, or I can take none of it. But I have experienced it. Is this making sense what I'm saying? That discernment is embracing what's happening, taking it in, actually letting it flow in, flow out, experience it, and then making a decision. Is this for me or not for me? Is that making sense so far what I'm saying here? That judgment is more of a mental thing, and discernment is based upon acceptance and experience. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Judgment, so it's coming from fear, an emptiness. It's learned behaviors. It's the patterns that we've learned or maintained. And what we're really doing through judgment is we're just using judgment to maintain our sense of control, our sense of validation. Do I exist, and how can I maintain my existence? How can I keep myself safe and secure? Okay, that is all ego-based. Now, that's great when we're in the jungle being chased by lions and dragons. But not so necessary when we're just, you know, in the countryside or in nature or in the city and just walking around and somebody looks at me the wrong way. So judgment is very helpful when we need to preserve our life, but on transactional basis, like with relationship, whether that's emotional, mental, experiential, we'll get far more out of our relationships when we use discernment. We can shut down our relationships through judgment. We can shut down our relationships through our experiences and life experiences through judgment, because we're treating it as if it's kind of like life or death. And then we become very close and rigid. Discernment, when we cultivate it, it comes from a connection to source where we are resilient, we're autonomous. We've cultivated wisdom and understanding. And by the way, I'm going to make a distinction between wisdom and understanding. But everything through discernment is not about self-preservation. It is about expressing pure essence and creativity. That's the big difference between judgment and discernment. Does this contribute to life? Whereas judgment is about, does this contribute to my survival? Do you guys understand the difference there? Does this contribute to the promotion of life and creativity and vitality? Or does this contribute to my own preservation, my own sense of self, my own control, my own well-being despite others? That's what I think is the big difference between judgment and discernment. Discernment is far more generous, but it can be very, very firm. Any comments on that? Maybe that's controversial, maybe it's contradictory, I don't know. Any thoughts?
Well, I think resonates a lot with me, especially because now I'm learning on how to use much more discernment instead of judgment, because as soon as you get more acquainted with the source, judgment isn't an energy that fit with the source somehow. It's included, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And yes, about being firm, I absolutely resonate with that, because I became more compassionate with people in fear and distressed, but I am much more firm and determined in realized my vision based on my experience, based on my resilience, based on my understanding.
I believe that this discernment comes from being connected to a rock, that source. This is a solid rock foundation, whereas judgment is like being on sand. I feel unstable as it is. I'm not really connected to anything except to my own self concepts, constructs, and therefore I need to push things away or accept things in that agree with this little bubble that I'm in. That's very fragile, actually, I think. Discernment comes from a complete fluidity, because there is an unconditional acceptance of everything. It just means, okay, I accept everything as it is, but is that for me or not? For my purpose, for my creative purpose right now. Maybe it's good later, but right now, maybe it's not good. It doesn't mean it is bad. That's, I think, another thing between judgment and discernment. Judgment will say good, bad. Discernment will say good for now, not good for now, according to expressing essence and creativity and purity. There's a subtlety there. I don't know if you feel it, but I do. Yeah. Kirsten, did you have anything, or how's this for you, or I'm making it?
No, just all good. I think it's especially what's needed in the business world, that you cannot judge anything and you cannot control anything and you cannot predict anything, but it's demanded, especially in leadership, every day. So how to make judgments and stay fluid in the same time, that's very complicated.
Very
but
complicated.
You can do it,
And it is a discipline.
like judgment on facts.
Yeah.
But still knowing that despite all of your judgments and decisions, everything can be, and you cannot control the result.
Yeah.
But it's also being okay with knowing you judge and knowing you make a decision.
Yeah.
It's necessary now. It's maybe not always just good for now or bad for now. It's also accepting that bad things are necessary right now and still stay safe.
Yeah. Now, what I'm not saying that judgment is bad and that we can't judge.
Not just the rigidity,
It's about
just the pretending I know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
This is a first level judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we can move from judgment into acceptance, because we can say, all right, I have a judgment, but I'll suspend it. I will not act on it right now. I can go into acceptance. Then I can experience things. So that opens my fluidity. It makes me more resilient. Then I can move into discernment. And discernment is a second level judgment. It's a decision. It says yes or no. This is for me or not for me. But it is based upon an open and fluid experience. Judgment is about, I've made the decision before the experience, basically. So that will protect myself. This keeps me limited. This keeps me open and adaptable. Okay, and I can keep discerning and discerning and discerning. And maybe sometimes with my discernment, I make the wrong choice, but I can still adapt and make the next choice. Okay, judgment is constantly scrambling to control the choices, is what I'm going to say. And we do talk about this more with the 8 stages of truthful relationship. How do you move from, recognition to judgment to acceptance to fascination, appreciation, enjoyment, etc., etc., etc. Eventually to creation. So there's a reason why Buddhism dealt with both, and that discernment was basically a next level of judgment. And this is how I'm defining it here. this could make it maybe possibly clearer. We've seen this before in other webinars, but we have our story, our point of view, our singular truth. When we come into relationship with others, I have my truth, you have your truth, we can come into opposition, so we either agree or disagree. That basically is the level of judgment. I'm judging my world, myself, you, all according to criteria that's going to keep me safe in my bubble. You're going to do the same thing. And that's why it's going to create conflict or opposition. Sometimes agreement and consensus, okay? We're, okay, yeah, everything is fine. But still, then we're preserving each other's bubbles. But we're not getting an expanded sense of truth. We're only getting one point of view, basically. When we drop into dream, this is where we're willing to be influenced. This is where the acceptance comes in, with the fascination. Acceptance, fascination, and then appreciation and enjoyment. And we can be in relationship and be in true exchange without feeling threatened. That means we're building resilience by opening our bubbles. That eventually can drop us into essence. So discernment, I believe, comes from this dream level where we're in a fluid reality. Fluid truths may be true now, may not be true later, but more can be true. And then our intuition is actually coming directly from source. We're channeling that in, and that is a unified truth where anything can be really true, anything can be created. So we can use all of these together, our intuition, our discernment, our judgment, story, game, dream, source. And that is what is creating the wisdom when we use all these levels together. Wisdom is not about past experience and, oh, I've experienced it, so therefore I know. No, that is just simply a collection of knowledge. Wisdom is I understand the story, I understand the game, I can enter the dream and I have access to source, and I use that all together to determine what's in the reality right now and what can I provoke and create and respond to and keep co-creating. So how's that for a new perspective on these 4 levels of truth and relationship as far as discernment, wisdom, and intuition go? Any thoughts there? Or what that sparks? It's just giving you more context on these diagrams that I keep showing again and again. Or give me a thumbs up.
Oh, good. I don't know what to say, Troy. Okay. It's just it's the basic pyramid. So,
yeah, basic pyramid. Yeah.
And as we said, the story game, it's nothing bad. It's just not where peace lives.
Yeah, peace doesn't live here because it is all based on conditions. Therefore, there's always a wills. Here, peace exists because we're in an unconditional space. Therefore, each of us can have an inner peace and an unconditional acceptance of what's going on. And we can still have diversity. It's still fine to disagree in the dream space.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't mean...
And without the others, it would be very boring.
Well, exactly. Well, in fact, that's what source is, because it's such a, a unified truth. Everything is true. There's no need for movement. It's total inertia. So we don't live down here, but in source. We live mostly in game and story, but if we access dream, we can keep evolving the game and the story. And it's when we don't have access to that, this is where we keep repeating cycles. And this is what we're creating the victim persecutor. This is where we keep repeating patterns and nothing comes to any kind of sort of reconciliation or resolution. So it's the key is dropping.
And there would be no learning, No
learning.
Learning comes only from the opposition, and then you feel there's a dissonance.
Yeah.
And then you have to go a step further and feel the dissonance and see what now is true for you.
That's when we're entering dream and source that we can do those things. Otherwise, when we're stuck in game, opposition means, why are you so against me? And that's it.
Yeah. It's just the ability to flip.
Yeah. Dream allows us to switch sides, actually. You can be black, I can be white. Now I can be black, you can be white. And we can realize, oh, we're actually complementary. That's more what dream is about. And we can switch through both sides, as opposed to saying one is better than the other. So we can learn, we can truly learn from each other. We can truly learn from the challenges we bring to each other. And it's through friction and challenge that we are going to be creative. If there is no friction, there is no fire. There you go. So wisdom. There's 3 levels here. We have knowledge, we have understanding, we have wisdom. Knowledge is basically just a collection of data. I know these dates. I know these facts. Dot, 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 dot. And I'm just collecting a bunch of things that I can memorize and know. Whereas understanding starts to take all those dots and recognize patterns and functions. How does this all function together? How does it all interconnect? That is using the knowledge to understand how the knowledge works. Wisdom goes a step further, and it can apply those patterns and functions to our daily experiences, which means okay, so I have an understanding of the patterns, but now I see the patterns in action and I can participate in them, I can respond, and I can be creative. And I'm experiencing as I go. Like I said, sometimes we think wisdom is about, oh, I have lots of experience in this, that, and the other. Well, maybe it just means I have lots of knowledge. Maybe it means I have just lots of understanding. It doesn't mean I'm applying all those past experiences to the present experience and projecting into the future experience. I'm not necessarily being creative. Wisdom is creativity. So knowledge is limited to just parameters, a set little box of here's where all the dots are, and it's based on past. It has no idea of future. It just is collecting dots as it goes. Understanding is just limited to all the known behaviors and the trends and the patterns. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to know what the future patterns are. Now, there's more to say on that. It could model the future, but it doesn't know the future, or it can't create the future. Wisdom, though, can take those parameters, the past, the known behaviors, and it can predict and respond and adapt in the moment. Why? Because it knows how things are functioning. And it can accept new information and integrate that into how things are functioning. Okay, this is what wisdom is. So knowledge is all about just memorizing things, assembling things, and categorizing things, just keeping them organized. So I have lots of facts and figures, and that's it. Understanding can take all those facts and figures, analyze them, create models, patterns, functions, and then it can reconstruct, and it could predict and it can reconstruct, but it's going to still follow the model. It's not going to participate in the model. Okay. Whereas wisdom is all about creativity and flexibility, and it's going to execute new things in flow with how things are working. It understands how things are working. It can contribute to how things are working. It can respond to how things are working. It can flow with how things are working, and it can introduce new information and co-create. That is what wisdom is about. Does this shed any light on anything for you guys, or is this a weird explanation of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom? I'd just like to hear what you're thinking here.
Well, this just make an order in what was my experience in all this period. So it's well structured and much clearer than my vision, and it's can give more sense and the possibility by looking this this framework and how be more, use it more deliberately. So get connected with the source and use understanding and wisdom to create my vision.
Yeah, and that
In
brings in
flow.
will and intention, but the will and intention are coming from an informed place, all right? You can't have wisdom without knowledge and understanding. What I'm saying is a lot of people claim they're wise, but they only have knowledge. Other people claim they are wise, but they only have understanding. There are truly wise people that are using the knowledge and the understanding to flow with the current reality, and they can create a future. And I will add, they have generosity and humility. I find that with knowledge and understanding, ego creates a rigidity. It can say, well, I know the facts, or I understand everything that's going on, and this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is the way it's supposed to work. But there still is a rigidity. I think the main difference between wisdom and the other two, knowledge and understanding, is the ability to be flexible and responsive and still be very on track. And even someone who's very wise can get very lost, but they can find their feet very quickly. Someone with only knowledge will get lost very easily because there's no dots to hang on to. Someone with understanding will only function well as long as they're working within the known patterns, but a new pattern emerges, they have to figure it out again, so they get temporarily lost. Someone with wisdom says, I've got lots of data, I've got lots of patterns, I know how they function, and I know how to apply them, so it's no problem to introduce a new pattern to me, because it's just going to join into what I already know, and I'm willing to respond to all the new behaviors that are introduced to me. So with wisdom, wise people stay in flow even when they don't know. I guess there's an ability to trust the unknown when you are wise. That's one of the conclusions I'm coming to as I speak. What are your thoughts on that, or responses there? I mean, here I really want to make the distinction that age does not equal wisdom, okay?
No, absolutely not.
There are people that are 65 years old claiming they're so wise and they're still acting like children. I mean, like it's like they never learned. So, I don't know.
No, I think that my personal experience, what I observe in other people and myself, is that wisdom comes with awareness, with the constantly willing to connect with the source.
An adaptable awareness, and yes, with the source, and match it back to the source, and yeah, it's a back and forth flow of express the source, bring it back to source, express the source. Yeah. I noticed that we're coming to the top of the hour, so I just wanted to go through intuition. But if you know, you need to drop out, I know Yarena, you were saying you had to go soon. Intuition is different than logic, and I just wanted to make the distinctions between the two. Logic is connected to knowledge, whereas intuition is connected to source. Knowledge is limited, source is unlimited. Logic is based upon constructed information. It's the information we gather and then we can build upon that. Whereas intuition is received information. It's information we never knew before, and it's coming in. We are receiving it. So logic is limited to prior knowledge. Therefore, we can't create anything new. We can only say 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 2 = 4. Whereas intuition is coming from, it's unlimited. It's unlimited possibility, unlimited potential. And there's always new knowledge coming in. And we don't necessarily know how that knowledge came to be. We can analyze it later, but it is instant knowledge in its full form. Therefore, we could say 1 + 1 = anything. We don't need the 1 + 1. What we really look at is, where did the 1 come from? The 1 came from the intuition. Okay? So logic is based upon calculation, and it's analyzing all the particles. Whereas intuition, it's holistic. It's an instant recognition of something new, and it's in its fullest form. It's already there. That is how intuition works. We can pull apart the knowledge later, but the intuition, it's like you get the whole story or the whole paragraph, then we can pull it apart into the individual words, grammar, and letters. Logic is a mental process. It's very linear, whereas intuition is alinear. It doesn't necessarily make sense. It can be here, 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 and here, but it comes in as a whole, and it comes through our whole body and our whole brain. Therefore, in order to access intuition, we need to be in touch with our body, and we need to be leaving behind the left brain preference. We need to be uniting left and right brain together, plus front and back brain, and connect the brain to the whole body. So there needs to be a whole congruent experience of what we're thinking, feeling, and doing, and that way we can start channeling things in from a higher awareness. We've talked about this in other webinars, but it's through congruency that we can access intuition. We can't just be using our brains. With logic, like I said before, there is really no new creativity, but we can accumulate and amalgamate new ideas. But it's all based on known information, whereas intuition is just simply raw creativity. It's basically received and it's raw. Any comments there on how intuition is working? I mean, a lot of people say, where does intuition come from? I'm going to say it comes from your connection to source. But it's how do you access the source, really? Hey, welcome, Benjamin.
Hey.
So we're already an hour in, so you'll have to listen to the recording, but you can keep moving forward with us. I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Any comments there on the logic and the intuition on how the two compare to each other? And I'm not saying we don't need logic. We need logic. But if we want to get creative, we need to be accessing intuition because that's where we get our raw material. Then once we have our raw material, we can move into logic mode and start pulling it apart and analyzing it, okay? Then we can really understand how it functions. It's like when someone says, and this is actually a quote from what Gladwell's book on Blink, Intuition, Malcolm Gladwell, said there are some people that can just look at a painting and say within a second, hey, that's a fraud. They may not know why, but they know it, they feel it. It's an instant knowing, like they get the entire information all in one fell swoop. Now, they could spend 3 days analyzing that painting and prove that they were right, that yes, that is a fraud, and here's how I can say it. That's the logic part. But the intuition will say, I know immediately that's a fraud. So we need to use both together, all right, in order to develop more discernment in our lives. If we're using intuition and logic together, we have a higher intelligence because we're not just basing every decision on a hunch, but we can take that hunch, we can pull it apart, and we can prove it to be what it is. Or we can realize that hunch was a false hunch. All right. Any comments here? Or how's this working for you so far?
It's working very well. And I keep the occasion to thank you very much, Troy. I will watch the record. Okay. And it is wonderful anytime seeing you.
Yeah, and we don't have much further to go, but I know you have to drop off, right? So,
yes.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes, enjoy, Irina. Yes, enjoy. Bye. So, I'm moving into the summary. So I almost made this into an hour. It's just going to go a tiny bit over. And then I'd love to take questions. I know I just gave you a lot of presentation, not a lot of methodology here. The other webinars will give more of the methodologies on how to access these things. Critical thinking. I think this is what it all builds up to. Critical thinking is using a combination of logic, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. I didn't include intuition there because I thought, well, that's not necessarily critical. However, you can bring in intuition, but you still have to critique it, okay? Critical thinking is a way to navigate through what's true, what's not true, as opposed to just saying, I just simply swallow what I hear. And I think that's what's happening too much right now, is people are just reading articles, reading websites, and just saying, oh, that sounds convenient, now that's true, without sourcing it, without analyzing it, without critically thinking through it, without being critical, without using logic, common sense, without using their own understanding and wisdom, or even their own intuition to compare. I think that what we all need to do right now in this world is cultivate critical thinking. It's very necessary because we're walking through a hall of mirrors right now. Everything is an illusion, an opinion, a point of view, a half truth, a half lie, a full truth, a full lie. We don't know what's what. And it's through critical thinking. That's one way to navigate, all right? Another way is to pay attention to intuition. This will come from listening to our own body intelligence, which means we need more self-awareness. And we need to pay attention to what our body signals are. Pay attention to the gut, the heart, the feet, the hands. We need to activate our whole brain, not just depend on left side logic, but bring in more of a holistic and creative sense through our right brain, immediate, present sense through our right brain. We need to cultivate a congruent state within ourselves. That takes discipline. And we need to be able to connect to source. That is the most important. We can have critical thinking and body intelligence and whole brain experiences, and we can be in congruency. But if we keep giving away our power to some other source outside of ourselves, and we don't have a sense of source within, we don't have a compass. So the most important is the ability to connect to source, our permanent, timeless, unconditional selves, where we have access to all potential and infinite awareness. And we all can experience that daily, and we do experience that daily. And really, it comes back to that question we said at the beginning, despite all, how am I still okay? What makes me okay right now? What is that I'm connecting to? That is source, and that brings us to resilience. So when we are connecting to source and using critical thinking, using our body intelligence, being congruent, we're able to become a clean channel to receive information beyond our own experiences, our own logic, our own personal bias. This is fresh, creative, raw information. And that is what's going to have us jump levels in life to evolve. If we keep going in circles with just known logic, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to keep repeating. Next point in summary, wisdom. In order to acquire wisdom, we need to move through knowledge and understanding. And Benjamin, a few slides ago, we went through what exactly are the difference between knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. But not only just knowledge and understanding, we need to have resilience and humility, because that is what allows the flexibility and adaptability, the ability to be present, the ability to work with, the ability to be co-creative. That is also wisdom. It's not just past experiences, but it's using the past, using our knowledge and understanding of the past, and marrying it with the present, and being able to predict into the future, and then come back to the present and respond and be creative. So wisdom is not a collection of experiences. It is much more than that. When we can flow truthfully with our experiences, be at a truthful level with ourselves, and explore truth around us. And why would we do that? It's to find what is the lesson available in every experience. And when we can start learning and mastering those lessons, that's when we acquire wisdom. It's through mastering lessons. Being able to detect the lesson, draw the lesson out, learn it, and master it. Judgment is the opposite of acceptance. So discernment is the next level of judgment. Discernment begins with acceptance. And yes, we will return to judgment, but it is different. It's a return to judgment after we have actually experienced the truth of something, the truth of the moment, and it's from a real tangible experience. It's not about a prejudgment. Discernment is really about the choice to engage or not based upon truthful experience that came from acceptance. By the way, feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to make any comments or ask a question here. We've spent many webinars cultivating resilience on how do you do that? How do you access that resilience and vitality within ourselves? When we start cultivating resilience within ourselves, that expands our ability to perceive and to discern. It opens our reality around us, because if we're non-resilient, we are going to be in a mode of self-preservation and rigidity. We're going to be closed. So we're going to have a very limited experience of what the reality is able to offer us. When we're open, resilient, we're also accessing source, so that brings autonomy. And with that autonomy, we are free to critically think. Why? Because we're free to question. Why? Because we're free to be criticized. We're free to say, I'm questioning this. I'm not going to swallow this yet. And someone else might say, oh, shame on you for criticizing that. Well, I'm resilient. That's fine. I can take that. So autonomy brings the freedom to question and to critically think. And that allows us to access our own wisdom first without deferring to some outside source. And then that allows us to choose to engage with something. Do I buy into that or do I not buy into that? We can engage with it out of our own autonomous choice without needing or having a dependency on other people or other sources. We don't need approval. And we have humility to accept other opinions. So someone can think, oh, I believe in flat earth. I can say, yeah, I've thought that through. I've looked into it. I'm choosing not to buy into that. I'm going to move into something else. But I'm not going to criticize you for being a flat earther. We can still work together because I have humility. I have resilience. Your flat earth doesn't threaten my reality. I know my reality. And I don't need to go on a crusade to get you to believe with me, to believe in my belief, okay? So this is really what we're going towards here. This is one of the importance of resilience and autonomy. It's our ability to perceive and discern our reality, to critically think, access our wisdom, and choose to engage without depending on someone else's approval or someone else's knowledge. So to sum it all up, it all pulls back to connecting to source. Source, that infinite all potential and awareness, that brings us in touch with our vitality, okay? So how do we get in touch with source? We have to pay attention to our own life force, our own vitality. What is getting me through the day? What is the energy I'm using to get angry or sad? What is the energy I'm using to fight? Connecting to source begins with our vitality and a sense of permanence and timelessness. How am I still okay despite all? We're accessing that part of ourselves that is all potential and infinite awareness. This is what takes us beyond our stories, our ego, our narrative, our conditioning. And when we can push that aside and say, I'm getting rid of all these constructs for a moment, and I'm just paying attention to me at source, my divine spark. This is what restores our universal nature as divine and creative human beings, and that's what unifies us. Then we can celebrate at that point diversity because we are unified. We're universal. Our connection to source brings a natural benevolence, flow, and faith in each other, ourselves, and in the world and in our life, because we're constantly co-creating, and we're co-creating from source. So, Benjamin, I know you heard a lot of information. Any comments or questions or disagreements there? This is just summarizing what we looked at in the past hour.
Yeah, to the first bullet point, critical thinking. You explained it well with the use of truths, right and wrong. You mentioned that. Do you remember?
Yeah, critical thinking. It's more of a sorting. It's researching, sorting, and referencing to a source. That's what critical thinking is.
Oh, so the source would be then dependent on. So who's defining source then? Is it the owner of
There's
the
two levels of source there. So, what's the source of the information, and what's the source within me, and how is it also matching, right? So it's like two different senses of source there.
Two different senses of source.
Well, I read an article, I need to know what the source is. I need to research into that source and see if it's reliable or not. And then I got to check in back with my own source within to say, how is this resonating? And do I buy it? Do I not buy it?
So it's my internal reference point, qualified by independence and resilience as characteristics, sort of.
Yeah, that's the decision whether I buy it or not. But I can still use critical thinking to come to that decision. And so that's where I need to research into what's the source of the information I'm getting here. Okay, I need to know where it's coming from, where they're coming from, what their agenda is, where they get their data from, all of that. It's basically polish the statue, polish the marble, instead of, just saying, oh, nice statue. No, I need to polish it off. Okay, polish off the crud. Critical thinking polishes off the crud, the bullshit, the distractions, and it gets to the pure source of the idea. All right.
So it's a reduction process, basically.
The reduction process, in a way, yes. It's getting, or distillation. It distills the information.
So the distillation process driven by the reference point of my inner essence. So that's my reference point. I'm constantly recalibrating what I have. I'm comparing that to my inner source, and by doing that, I realize which parts I can remove.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is, so I use the critical thinking to face a conclusion, right, or I'll say a decision. I'm at a crossroads. Now I have to connect with my own inner source to deal with that crossroads. Do I buy this idea or do I not buy this idea? And that's where the discernment will come in, right? So, so I'm using critical thinking to come at a choice or a decision. Critical thinking is helped with discernment for me to make that decision. But ultimately, if I'm not having any connection to my own inner source, I'm not going to be able to make a decision. I'm just going to buy whatever is really in front of me. Even if I've critically thought it through, it still could be, oh, that's convenient for me.
I just wonder whether the reductionary process to what I have at hand right now basically boils down to I'm connecting from my source through the thing I have at hand back to my source. So it's a circular process.
Yeah, I would agree. It's you're exercising source through the reduction and distillation process, because what's going to happen is as you reduce and distill, it's going to challenge and question things. You're challenging and questioning it. It's challenging and questioning you. So you're both kind of co-creating.
So I increase distance to my source, but I'm coming from source and to return to my source.
Yeah.
So origin and destination collapse in my source by the very vehicle of whatever I have at hand. So be it bullshit, be it some truthful stuff or whatever.
Yeah, and what I believe is this is actually a more valuable process, because what am I going to do? I'm going to buy into things partially, not wholly, meaning I read an article in the newspaper. I can critically think it through. I can source it, and I can say, I'll take this, 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 and this, but not that, that, and that, and that. Because the things I don't accept seem to be, untrue or biased or this or that, but the things I'm taking seem to be pure.
So it's finding the source which is everywhere.
Yeah.
In things that is not me. So
it's finding nuance. It's finding nuance in everything.
Okay, nuance, new connection. So I'm increasing the connectedness to essence if I'm reducing something from essence.
Yeah. And it's a disciplined process of being able to hold my ego at bay so that I'm not just swallowing information that's convenient for my ego. This is actually finding information and challenging information that allows me to grow and expand my boundaries. And then reject old parts of myself or like the crud, right? I'm purifying my own self as
but necessarily I feel, isn't it that you have to go through a couple of death doors at times?
Oh, many. Yeah.
So that comes with the process, right? I have to give up different parts of myself, identifying them as false, whatever.
As we question ourselves and we question the information we're presented with or the knowledge we think we have, each new piece of information will be a death's door. And
really?
Thing. Yeah, because it crumbles our ego, our sense of self, and then we can rebuild it. This is where discernment comes through. Discernment is willing to be crumbled before it makes the decision to engage or not engage. So, I can feel into, oh, this is where this is going to bring me. Yeah, I'm not going to play that game. So no, I'm not going to do it. Or I feel into this. Yeah, that's not going to be a great game for me, but I'm willing to go through with it. That's what discernment allows. Judgment just says, that smells fishy, I'm not doing it. I will have nothing to do with it. It's so rigid and closed.
So in contrast to that, discernment would be, oh, I'm doing it in the awareness of it's not the thing for me, but doing it and working through it from a context of source connectedness, I can go through it. So would you say so?
I will be resilient through it and I can take something from it, yes.
So discernment is judgment plus connectedness to source?
Yeah, I would say it's connectedness to source plus, choosing to engage or not. I'm staying away from the word judgment because judgment has its own connotation. It is a next level of judgment. It's a different way of judging. Okay?
So you don't depend on the judgment. You can do that judgment, so you're free not to do it in the situation.
Yeah, it's an autonomous choice, and the choice is in line with an expression of source. What I said earlier was discernment is more about, judgment is all about preservation of self and ego. Whereas discernment is more about a pure creative expression of source. I choose to do this because it fits with a pure expression of source, right?
You repeat the last sentence? I wasn't incorporating it.
Okay. Well, discernment allows me to make choices that are difficult, but I know why I'm doing it. What you said was it's with awareness. And I'm aware of consequences. I'm aware of where this can lead me, but I'm also aware of what I can gain from it. Okay.
So I'm going through it
with full
knowingly, it will be not the easy way, but I know that there is some midterm, long-term benefit I will not realize instantly. So not instant gratification.
Yeah, judgment seems to be, well, if we talk snap judgment, it's a quick fix. It's a quick yes, no, a quick, it just doesn't fit. And we don't really know why it doesn't fit, truthfully. We think we know why because we say it doesn't match my parameters. It doesn't match my preferences. It doesn't match my past experience.
And discernment sounds interestingly like kind of sort of just the opposite at times to judgment, because judgment is preventing or is just a shield of confronting myself with that situation. Yeah. Whereas discernment is, I'm just realizing this is not the easy way here, but I'm also realizing there is something behind that, the hero's journey. If I go through it, slay the dragons.
Yeah, that's right. Judgment will shield us from experience.
To judgment, right?
Yeah. Judgment will shield us from experience, but discernment will welcome the experience, but then it can choose whether it engages or not with that experience, what it's going to buy into or not.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for this. Another one would go for related to the circle point regarding wisdom. You mentioned wisdom is not solely the experiences where I'm acting from in the present. It's the utility derived from the experiences or something like that.
We went through it before, but this is a good recap. People think wisdom is, oh yes, I've had many past experiences, therefore I have all this knowledge, right? And I know how things go. And I'm wise because I've had much experience. It's more than that. Knowledge is, I have lots of data. I have lots of dots. Understanding means I can connect all those dots. I can recognize patterns and functions, and I can, model and predict, but it's still limited to the dots I have. Whereas wisdom says, I have all that understanding. I understand, these patterns and functions, but I can apply it to the present moment. I can draw from all my past, but I can apply it to the present experience and respond and create according to new and old information.
Nice one. So the transferability of my experiences and knowledge to the very moment I'm in right now sounds to me like, an awareness, a connectedness to source, maybe. Yeah. The question here for me is, what are key enablers to be able to transfer it? What is the glue that makes that stick, that transfer happen? Is it just a connectedness to source, or is it something?
Well, it's more. I mean, it's also yes, it's going to be based on a connection to source, but it's also a connection to intelligence. I'm able to recognize and see, put the dots together, see the patterns, see how they function. And then I can predict how they can continue to function, but I can also adapt to new information.
Okay. So how is it related to perception then?
Well, I'm willing to accept new perceptions. I can go with what I probably think is going to be happening, but I'm also very quickly going to adapt and figure out what the new information is, not just based on experience, but based on my understanding of how things function in the present moment.
What are you saying about receptibility? So an
Yeah,
openness.
so you're receptive, you have humility, and you're generous. A wise person will say, I actually know nothing. It's like a paradox. I know everything, but I know nothing. So they're willing to constantly learn.
So the glass, which is full, acting from an awareness that is at the same time empty, to be filled with new experiences.
Yes.
Those experiences, to apply to those new experiences, incoming experiences, the full glass of water. So that paradox at the same time working.
Yeah, I think wisdom is very paradoxical, actually.
Yeah. So you're acting as a full glass of water, but at the same time doing that with an awareness of an empty glass of water, which enables to me that you receive the moment which is out there.
I guess, yeah, and even a shorter way of summing that up is a wise person, or if I possess wisdom, I'm not clinging to anything. I don't need to cling to my knowledge because I'm always available to new knowledge. I'm always able to produce new knowledge. So therefore, I don't have to cling to anything. Like if my glass is full, I don't have to cling to that. I can let it empty because I know how to fill it up again.
So it's basically the switch between both modes.
Yeah, well, we need knowledge and understanding in order to start acquiring wisdom. So, and add to that the connection to source. So, but I find that, and in my experience, having met truly wise people, which were very few, there was a generosity, a humility. There was a sense of being unconditional and being limitless. Whereas I've met many knowledgeable people, many smart people that have lots of understanding, but there's still this rigidity, like I know. So that's coming more from an ego. It's not a generous place.
So, or basing your identity at least partly on your knowledge. Whereas a wise guy is not doing that. He might have the knowledge, he might access it, but he's not depending on it. So he can enter a situation without depending on it. So he enters that situation, the very moment from source, basically.
You know, here's another metaphor I thought of, and I don't know if it's helpful or not, but look, so I give you a piece of paper with a whole paragraph on it, okay?
Yeah.
The knowledgeable person needs all the words. They know all the words, okay? A person with understanding, they have the whole paragraph, okay? But the wise person doesn't need that piece of paper at all. They just have a symbol that contains everything, the whole paragraph plus the words, and they could write new paragraphs from that symbol. Okay? The knowledgeable person depends on every letter and every word. The person of understanding depends upon the whole paragraph and how it functions and how all the sentences work together. But the wise person only needs one simple symbol to express the whole idea. They come from the whole idea.
Yeah, they're acting from an understanding. Whereas the others are acting from a clinging to help me. I need to record this. I need to manifest it So they're just manifesting their desire, their neediness to cling to it. So
Yeah.
they might act from a fear, not connectedness to source. Oh, I need to catch that. I can't live without it. So I'm just working with a dependency in place, where it's wise people are not doing it.
They don't cling to that piece of paper. They've got the idea within them. Whereas the person of knowledge or understanding needs to keep referring to that piece of paper with whatever paragraph is written on it. And they can't go beyond it. The wise person can go beyond because they're willing to throw the paper away. They've gotten the essence of it. This is how I teach all the EED techniques. I say, what's the simple hook here? I can give you the recipe, but you can go through all the steps, but what are you really going for? What's the real function here? Because that gives you the most flexibility to work with any randomness in front of you. You understand where you're going and you can deal with any detour along the way. That's when you're coming from wisdom.
So this implies the transferability part we referred to earlier, right? So
it implies what?
The transferability factor. So wise people are able to transfer. Well, the not so wise or not wise people, unwise people would rather depend on the specific words.
Yeah.
So let's stick to this specifics of this recipe. So they cannot easily transfer it. Whereas a wise man would just do the opposite. I don't need this recipe. I got the understanding of it, so I can handle the world and this very situation, which is different, and apply that. But I don't need this word by word.
A wise man can teach you anything according to your understanding. A less wise man will teach you something or everything according to their understanding.
So you're working, the wise man is working from the counterpart in a discussion, whereas the not so wise is just working from an ego point of view.
Yeah, an ego point, a particle point. You know, you have to have all the dots lined up in the right way in order for it to work, right? A wise man says, you arrange the dots in any way you wish. There's better ways to arrange them, but you need to know why you're arranging them the way you are. And then once you do that, you don't need me, because you can create the same thing every time, and you can create variations of it all the time. See, a great teacher will not just teach you the concept, but teach you how. No, not how, but they'll give you such an understanding of the subject that you understand it and you can create any variation of it. And you still understand the source of what you're learning, so you don't deviate. I don't know if that's very...
Yeah,
it's how I learned acting, it's how I learned music, it's how I learned all of these things. What would keep me on track? Because I needed, as a pianist, to be respectful to the source. I needed to respect the composer's intentions and not just kind of do my own thing just because it felt fun.
So it's not an imitation.
No.
So non-wise would be imitating. Wise would be, okay, acting from the understanding with variations.
Yes. A non-wise teacher would say, you know, you have to mix red and blue in this certain way to create this color, and you can't include yellow, or, you know, whereas basically a wise teacher says, hey, experiment with all the colors. I'll tell you, you know, which ones work best and all that, but you need to know why, and that's my job here. Why do these work?
So if you're just rigid and clinging to, oh, I need to do it precisely that way, that might be a very, very significant sign of, hey, that guy does not understand what really matters here in that concept.
Yeah, exactly. This is
so
what
there is no understanding in place.
Yeah.
Whereas the wise has got the key components. Oh, that matters here. So let's transfer this to that situation. That's so right. that relates to the symbols you referred to earlier. So that's the essence. That might be a result of the reduction process.
Mm-hmm.
and applying that would just work. Yeah, in the transfer part. Yeah.
Yeah. And a wise man is always willing to hear new information. And then they use the discernment to say, I buy it, I don't buy it.
And the unwise man, whereas when, meanwhile, the unwise man is still clinging to his words, not being able to receive the information in plain sight.
That's right. And so the unwise man becomes static, and that's when the unwise methods become dogmatic. They're static because they're clinging to, you know, their facts, their knowledge. They're unwilling to receive more information, right? It's not organic.
Right. So basically orbiting around their own ego.
Yeah, basically. And the whole point of EED is to make us organic. It's to make us resilient. It's to make us wise. It's to make us discerning. There's far more freedom. There's far more autonomy in that, far more creativity in that, far more acceptance, and much more humility. And that enables us to thrive as opposed to thrive and cooperate and co-create as opposed to compete and hoard and basically destroy or kill.
Yeah.
So
what else? Let me just recap on the last bullet point.
As you think about it, I'm just going to say to those listening to the recording, so we have an online module 1 coming up in October, on October 9th to 11th. It's going to be European times, so like afternoon and evening European times, October 9th to 11th. And then we have our next webinar on September 16th, which is Essential Purpose, which will be very interesting because it's very different than life purpose. This is essential purpose. This is where I have meaning. I'm on track. I have meaning in my life, but there's nothing I have to do to prove it. I'm constantly on purpose. Even when I do my dishes, I'm making contribution. And at the same time as I'm making contribution, I'm learning lessons from life. As I make a contribution, life will also challenge me, and that will only feed my contribution even more when I develop the resilience and humility to accept the challenges. So essential purpose takes it a step beyond what is normally considered life purpose. So that will be an interesting webinar. And this is the contact info. Visit our website, essence-dynamics.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, at EE Dynamics. You can contact me at info@essence-dynamics.com or troy@essence-dynamics.com. Did you have your final thought there, Benjamin?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I know you joined late. Is there anything special you're taking away from the webinar today?
As a wisdom part, I feel. So the paradoxical setup of approaching situations. So having the knowledge but not depending on it, and that met with a receptibility in the situation. So it's both. So I can switch to receiving things and working from the other side instead of orbiting around my ego.
Yeah.
Clinging to the knowledge. Yeah, and I do like that I can just focus coming right on this part and not being overwhelmed by all the other parts.
Yeah. Well, you'll get the recording and we will send it out, and that'll be on the YouTube channel as well.
Cool.
And you can see the first hour where we broke things down between judgment, discernment, logic, and intuition, and we made distinctions between knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, and then how they're all working together. They're all necessary, but they're all at different levels. I think what stands out for me most is wisdom is a product of discernment, intuition, and source, connection to source, and it brings natural generosity and humility that it's like the wisest man becomes the fool again, but it's like if we started as the fool, go through all these experiences, accumulation of knowledge and experience, and then we come back to the fool. The fool is that much wiser, but the fool has also maintained that sense of innocence and openness and has wisdom to apply everything that comes in and discern everything that comes in. I think that is the truly wise man or woman or person.
So acting with a freshness of before the first moment,
Yeah,
with awareness and not depending on the same
yeah,
of all of your experiences and knowledge.
exactly. With nothing to prove, nothing to be, nothing to do, nowhere to go. It's you know, and they can choose to act on anything. It has nothing to do with controlling things or being approved of or validated. So, yeah. I've always found wisdom to be very generous. Yeah. So that closes it. So thank you everyone for joining and for listening to the recording. And thank you, Benjamin, for being here. I thank Irena and Kirsten. And then our next webinar will be September 16th, Essential Purpose. And if you're interested in learning more about EED, check out the YouTube channel or Twitter or Facebook, and feel free to sign up for our courses starting in October.